So welcome everybody today to our today's webinar. Thank you for joining us on this lovely day. So my name is Udo Schneider and I'm the sales manager at or sales director at Mirasys. So today we are presenting a new webinar with the topic of failover in Mirasys VMS, the different capabilities of master and recording server redundancies. So before we start, just a little housekeeping again. So if you have any questions, please use your Teams control panel and type them in so that we can answer them during the meeting or during the webinar or at the Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So I'm trying to bring them up during the presentation. At least I will answer them at the end of this webinar. If I'm not able to answer them because I'm a sales manager and not a technician, so please also leave your email address so that we can answer or send you the answer later on. So it would be not very good if you are anonymous here and you have a question and we cannot answer them. So in that case, it would be great. All right, so let's move to our topic today, the failover in Mirasys VMS. So this was a topic from your wish list. So when we have asked you, okay, what are the topics that you wanted to see or you wanted to have a webinar from? So you said, okay, failover would be very interesting. And so also our agenda today is reflecting this topic. So first of all, of course, for those who are the first time in this webinar and hearing the first time about Mirasys, we need also to have some items about the Mirasys, where we are, who we are, what we are doing, etc. Then it is a must to understand the architecture. So I want to jump slightly over the architecture and show you how Mirasys architecture is designed. And then we want to talk about the redundancies, the different redundancies. And at the end, I have also some slides or one slide for the Supermaster configuration, which might be new for some of you, but I have bigger customers who are still using this and that might be also interesting for you. So at the end, Supermaster configuration. I don't want to go into the technical details today. So it's more, let's say, to give you an overview, what we can do and how it is working. If you want to go more into the technical details, then you need to contact us or we can contact you and we can discuss this, hand over some manuals, give you some advice, etc. So in that case, our support is really willing to help you. Okay, let's start with some sentence about Mirasys. Mirasys is now 20 years, more than 20 years in the business. So we are a company that is based in Helsinki in Finland. And we are providing video management software. So we have an open platform architecture. That means we want to connect to every third-party solution that is in the market or that is installed at the customer premises. And this is also reflecting our philosophy. So the system as it is right now has been developed by the requirements of our customers. And that's the reason why we are also having proven solution in different verticals you are working in. So you see that we are dealing worldwide. So in more than 40 countries, we have representatives and we are doing indirect business via our partners. So we have resellers, distributors, integrators, etc., who are reselling our solution. As I said, we are demanding for our customer requirements and therefore our VMS is an open ecosystem. That means we have very easy implementation capabilities to third-party solutions like facial recognition, VCA partners, camera manufacturers, PASM solutions, etc. So, and this is our biggest strength that we have, that we are in a very open system. So yeah, these were some information about Mirasys. If you want to hear more of this, so please either contact our partners or contact us directly so we can hand over much more information to you. We can share this with you. And if you want to have a demo as well, so you can also request a demo from us. So we can do this on an, let's say, an online demo, as well as provide you software and demo licenses so that you can test our system in depth. Okay, yeah, I'm jumping over this. So we have talked about that. All right, so let's go into the detail and have an overview of our architecture. As you may see here, Mirasys has a master and slave architecture. So that means we have a master server here with an SQL database. And this master server has some services on it. This is the SM server and the watchdog server. So SM is the system managing servers, and VD is the watchdog services. Beside this, we have also our slaves or recording servers, some calling them slaves, some calling them recording servers. So at the end, they are responsible for doing the complete recording of the cameras, as well as if you're using VCA, video content analysis, for example, or motion detection, also doing these services on its own machine. They have also a metadata base, an SQL database, as well as the hard disks inside normally for online recording. So the master is doing nothing else than controlling what the slaves are doing. So he's doing the health check of the camera network, of the slave servers, and he's also handling if you, for example, with your spotter client or with your web client wanted to access the system and see some cameras, live view of cameras, or requesting some recordings. So the master server then is allowing you the access, is granting you to what cameras you have the right to watch to, etc., etc. So he's completely managing this access. This is the general architecture. So if you have only one machine, for example, then master and slave are running on the same machine. So this can be done up to 5 slaves. And then let's say from the 5th slave, we need to separate the master from the slave, so on an own server, because then the watchdog services are becoming more and more. So the controlling is becoming more and more, and you need to split this into a different server. So that's about the simple architecture of this. So remember, master server and slave servers. Slave servers for recording, master server for controlling the system, for managing the system, and for keeping the access to the system from the client point of view. Okay, let's talk about the redundancies. So we have different redundancies I want to talk about today. So the first is the separation of different parts of the architecture into different servers. The second is I wanted to just give you a note about the virtualization. Then we have a couple of slides about the internal failover recording. And I wanted to mention also the multiple recording at the end. So, and then, as I mentioned before, I give you also some hints and tips about Supermaster. This has nothing to do with redundancy, honestly. This is just another functionality that helps you to manage bigger systems or multi-client systems. Okay, let's have a look to the separation. Okay, so back to the architecture. So we have different items that we can separate. First of all, you have seen that we are running with SQL, Microsoft SQL. So in that case, it is very easy on the master server as well on the slave servers to separate the SQL databases into a different SQL machine or SQL server. So you can create there your own instances. You can route the SQL database from the master server and from the slaves to your own SQL server. And then you can do redundancies on the SQL server as you're used to. So first of all, you can separate the SQLs from the server. Secondly, what you can do as well as in separation is here mentioned in this small block. Each slave has his own hard disks normally inside where he's recording to. So you can separate them to network. to network drives, for example, so that you do not need to have the hard disks inside. You can use them on a network drive or an net attached storage or whatever. So this is the second separation. And finally, also, you may know that we have gateway services. If you are coming via the internet from or remotely via Spotter mobile application or your Spotter for Windows or your web client, you need to access the system over the DVMS gateway services. So then it's also very simple to separate the gateway server or gateway servers, which can run on the master server as well as at each slave to a separate gateway server. The gateway server is limited. That's the reason why we can put them on each server. So if you have multiple remote clients who wanted to access the system via the internet, then it is recommended really to use an own gateway server. So again, separation does mean either to separate the SQL databases from the server to an own SQL database server, to separate the gateway service to a special gateway server for better performance, or to separate the online recording from the slaves to a net attached storage or network drive or whatever you want to use. So this is about separations. So this gives you a certain kind of redundancy, honestly. So because then you can manage your SQL server, you can manage the network attached storage in the way you used to in your IT network. Okay, let's move to the next item, virtualization. Virtualization can be done on the master server as well as on the slaves or recording server. So you can use VMware or Hyper-V or other virtualization platforms for this. And then you have the capabilities either to run into, let's say, so-called hot swappable hardware, or you can share the hardware itself, as you can do it with VMware, for example, and run on the same machine with multiple cores, for example, the master server and the recording server and its redundancies. This gives you the highest availability in the system, virtualization, because then you are completely free how to design it. Honestly, this is actually the onlyest master server redundancy that we have. There is no other redundancy capability for the master server. So if you want to if you want to get redundancy on the master server, you have to use VMware or Hyper-V or other virtualization capabilities to have two machines to connect it together and hot swappable. You need to pay attention for this, even if you are a partner, then especially in that case, because the license normally still is MAC dependent. And you know, in the virtualization environments, the MAC addresses are not fixed, so they can change. So in that case, you need to inform us if you want to create a license, if you want us to create a license for this, for virtualized machines, that you either don't have a MAC address or that the MAC address is a virtual one. Yeah, and as I mentioned, you can have hot standby hardware or you can shared hardware, so you're completely free in that. So this is, in most of the cases, reflecting the IT strategies of bigger companies, of your customers, so that you can say, okay, if the customer is using, for example, VMware or Hyper-V or whatever, you can say, yes, we can do this. We can implement our system, our VMS into your virtual environment. Very interesting should be failover grouping. This is a Mirasys solution that enables you to use a failover server and hand them over or run some slaves on this failover. How it is looking like. So this is the first scenario. So we have multiple slaves here with a couple of cameras. So 50 cameras here, slave 2 50, slave 3 30 cameras, and slave 4 80 cameras. And then you can dedicate one failover server to this group. That means if one of the slaves is crashing or is losing the connectivity or is failing in writing to the hard disks or at least one of the hard disks, it is automatically detected, and the responsibility of recording these cameras which are connected to the slaves is handed over to the failover server. Honestly, this is not done immediately because it could be that one of the slaves, for example, is losing connection because of a network failure and is coming back, let's say, within 30 seconds. Or it is rebooting because of whatever. So in that case, it would be a nightmare if the failover is taking over and the slave is coming back. So that's the reason why we have a slider in our configuration that enables you to set up 1 minute to a couple of hours to wait until the slave is coming back. This does mean as well, and this is the second hint, that for this certain time of period that you are configuring, also you don't have any recordings. So it is up to you to balance if you want to virtualize because you don't need, you are not allowed to lose any recordings, or you're using failover. But failover at the end is in, let's say, 90% of the scenarios, the right functionality. So here in this case, we have 4 slaves, for example, which are dedicated to one failover. What is happening if slave 1, for example, is failing and the failover is taking over? And then, for example, slave 3 is also losing the connection. Honestly, nothing. This is a scenario that cannot be handled. So the failover is not also taking over the 30 cameras from slave 3. It is just dedicated to slave 1. And if a second slave is failing at the same time, it is not taking over anymore. It can take over only one slave. For this scenario, we have a second description. So multiple failover servers. So for one failover group, as designed here, you can dedicate multiple 1 or 2 or 3 or n failover servers. At the end, if you have, for example, 4 slave servers here, you can also dedicate 4 failover servers. In this case, if slave 1 is failing or is losing the connection, the first failover server is taking over. If slave 3 is losing the connection in the same time or afterwards, the second failover server is taking over. And if then a third slave is failing, you need to have a third failover server here that it can take over. So in that case, you have more redundancy here. So as I mentioned, you can say, okay, this failover group is having n slaves and up to n failover servers. Okay. The good point is you can group this. So you can have multiple failover groups, and the failover groups can as big as you want it to have. So for example, in this case, we have 8 slaves. We put them into 2 failover groups, and we have 2 failover servers per group. There is no handover from one group to the next. That means this failover 1 and failover 2 are only responsible for slave 1 to slave 4, and failover 3 and 4 are only responsible for slave 5 to slave 8. So if you have then, for example, failover group 3, failover group 4, you can manage this in many different scenarios. If you just wanted to have one slave, one failover, you can do this as well if you want. There is no limit in that case. Okay. Licensing is very simple. The failover server must have the same amount of license as the biggest slave in the failover group. Let's have a look to the failover group. You see slave 1 has 50 cameras, slave 2 50 cameras, slave 3 30 cameras, and slave 4 80 cameras. To take over one of those 4 slaves, the failover server must have the highest amount of cameras in the same way as the highest amount of one of the slaves. So the slave 4 has 80 cameras here, so it has the biggest amount of camera license. So the failover has also to have 80 camera license, independent of if the slave 1 has 50 or the slave has 30. It must have the same amount as the biggest server. If you have 2 failover servers here as well, it is the same way. If you have failover 1 and failover 2, it must have 80 cameras in failover 1 and 80 cameras as well in failover 2. So the license calculation is the same for the failover as for the slaves. I just need to mention that the failover licensing is done on the master server and not on the failover server. But from the sales perspective, it must have the same amount of cameras as the biggest slave. With regards to the pricing, please contact your partner or us, because in that case, we are also rethinking the pricing right now. And when our new price book is coming up, you will see that you have also here a certain advantage. So in that case, from the price wise. Okay. I do hope it make it more clear for the failover for the failover scenarios and the licensing. So just to give you a short overview how it is looking like in our system manager. So in the system manager, you need to go to the local recorder or to the recorder tab. And then you see I have only one recorder here inside. But if you have many recorders, go to the general tab, general settings of each recorder. And then here on the bottom, you can have the failover settings. You can define the failover server group ID. You can say if this server or if this recorder, the slave, should be used as a failover server, or if this should be used as a VMS or slave server dedicated to this VMS failover group. And then you can also say, okay, when should be the failover happen? If the VMS server or the master server is detecting a failure on connection lost, or if it is dedicated to if there is a hard disk broken inside, and then you can say when should be the connection lost established. So not before 10 minutes. I think we can go down to, I cannot because there is only one server inside, but it can be from 1 minute, minute-wise to 10 minutes, and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes to a couple of hours. So this is how it is designed. So very simple, very easy to define your failover groups. Okay, let's move back to the presentation. Okay. Next slide. Multiple recording. We have a functionality inside our system that enables you to record each camera on different servers. So in that case, one server, one recording or slave server is configuring the camera in an active mode. And the second or the third server, which is doing the second and third recording, is configured in the listening mode. That means only those recorder or those slave server, which is defining the camera in active recording mode, is communicating directly with the camera and sending the configuration. Those servers which are only doing listening mode, that means only simple stupid recording, are not sending any configuration, camera configuration to the camera. There is one problem or one issue that we have. It is not working with every camera. It is working only with cameras that allows us to have these dynamic user interface capabilities in their drivers. So for example, Hikvision is able to handling this, but there are also other cameras who are not allowing us to do this. So in that case, you need to ask before you want to use this, us or your partner, if these cameras are enabling you to do multiple recording. What does it mean? The same camera at the end is recorded on different servers with the same stream. So you can do dual recording in that case, as well as triple and fourth time recording, whatever you want. The servers, if you have a distributed system, for example, do not stay on the same premises. So you can record, let's say, on-site in the remote sites as well if you have enough streaming capacity in between as on the central site. I also just want to show you where you find it. Okay. So first of all, if you put in your camera, you're searching for your camera, for example, you have here in the hardware settings a tick to set up the camera in the passive mode. If you select this, then the camera cannot be configured from this server, from this slave server. I have, for example, here a Hikvision camera inside. In this case, I can enable this camera to be in passive mode or into listener mode. So in that case, it is not possible to change resolution and recording rate here. Okay, let's take it out. I have a second camera here from another vendor, for example. Here you cannot take because RTSP streaming is not allowing to do this in that way. So it's only active mode. Okay. As well as in the camera settings, you can also choose afterwards, where is my test camera, if you want to have active mode or passive mode here in the control mode. You see that this is blinking because this camera is not connected right now. So I did not connect this. There is another way to set up a camera in two different recorders. So for sure, you can also use a camera which is not allowing you to do this active and passive mode, and you can configure this in two different servers. But in that case, be aware, because you can configure this in both recorders, that this is not allowed. And then one of the recorders is losing connectivity and you are seeing no picture. So don't do this. Some of the cameras are allowing, next to the standard streaming, also an RTSP streaming. So I have tested this, for example, with an Aracon camera. This is the camera 19 here. In this case, I use the Aracon driver on one of the servers, and I'm using the RTSP streaming via the RTSP driver on the other server. So it is able to do this, but in this case, you need to be aware what the CPU load of this camera is if you do this. So if the camera is capable to do this, fine. If it is overruling the CPU of the camera, then be aware that you are not correctly streaming the RTSP stream, then it is interrupted. So the best way is really to ask us how to do this, with what kind of cameras it is capable to do dual and multiple recording. Okay, let's move back to our presentation. So again, to sum up, redundancies. We have spoken about the separation of different items or different parts of our architecture. So the SQL databases can be moved to an SQL server. The gateway services can be moved to a separate gateway server. And at the end, also the hard disks, the recording hard disks, can be moved to a NetAttach storage with its redundancies or to any other storage device. We have spoken about virtualization. Please be aware that you may have trouble in handling the MAC address related licensing. In that case, speak to us. We have capabilities to disable the MAC relation in that case. I could tell you stories about this, because then you are able also to use the license on other virtual machines. So one of my customer has done this, and we found it out. So in that case, it is really, to be honest, to have an honest relationship to your customer. Virtualization is the only capability to do redundancy, or to run a redundancy on our master server. Then we have spoken about the failover scenarios in our system. Failover grouping, different failover grouping with one or n failover servers. We have spoken about the licensing as well, how to use it. And we have also spoken about the hints and how to use it. And then finally, we have also spoken about the multiple recording capabilities, dual recording, triple recording, that it is depending on if a camera manufacturer is enabling the dynamic user interface capabilities in the camera API, or if he does not. So in that case, please ask us before you wanted to use it. And we have also spoken about some hints that you have in that case. Okay, so that's about redundancies so far. I would like also to have some words about the Supermaster scenario. We got a lot of requests about multiple client capabilities. For example, if you are a security service provider and you have different clients, then normally it is the fact that if the clients are running Mirasys machines, they have master servers or master recorders in their premises. And you, as the service provider with your command and control center or your control center, you need normally to connect to each of these master servers with your spotter to identify the scenarios and the situation on site. So what you can do is you can create a Supermaster which is able to connect to multiple master servers, multiple master recorders, and to handle via the let's say super spotter or super system manager to handle all these connected master servers with only one login. So on the Supermaster server in the database, if you connect one of the master servers, it has the same configuration. So the configuration is transmitted from the master server database to the Supermaster database, vice versa. That means if you do a camera configuration, if you add a camera, either in the system manager or in the super system manager, it is automatically synchronized. So in that case, you can also, as a service provider, provide those configuration service to your customer. The customer should not, or it is not necessary that the customer is doing it by yourself. You can provide him the service and ask for payment. The importance in between this is, and I'm talking about data protection, that the configuration of the recorder is transmitted and synchronized with the Supermaster between Master Server 1 and Supermaster, Master Server 2 and Supermaster. But the profile management, which is done on this master server for this system, and the user management is not transmitted, is not synchronized. That allows you as a super system manager, by using your system manager application, to define your own profiles, to define your own user rights. And at the end, because you are also aware that we have also these different system administrator right levels right now in the latest version, you are also able to, for example, set up an administrator for camera configuration only here, and for user management only as well. So you have a user management administrator as well as a camera configuration manager as well. So in that case, you really can reflect to the data protection scenarios that you have confirmed with your customer clients here. With customer client 1, customer client 2, you can offer them different, let's say, configuration services, and independent, he can also do his own configuration here. So in that case, it is secure. There is no user and profile management or profile configuration synchronized between those servers. Okay, how it is looking like. What I have here in my system is I have here my laptop. And on my laptop, for example, there's running a local recorder with this IP address 1110. I have a second server here, a smaller demo server. And on this demo server, this is also a master server. I can show this to you by logging in again. So you see here my local master server with this internal IP address. And you see here with 111, a second master server or second master recorder. And I can go and connect to him, what I'm not doing right now. So this is an independent master server. So I'm connecting to my internal one. All right. So now I'm going and add this demo PC, giving it a name, maybe a description, and I'm writing here 111. Okay. When you see right now, in a simple way, what the system is doing right now, it is synchronizing the configuration. And you see here, if I'm going to this, I have added this master recorder from one of my customer clients, in that case, my demo PC. And that's the way how it is done. What you can see here is, for example, if I'm going to the service profile, that it is not taking over automatically the sources from the remote server. So there are only the cameras here inside from my local recorder. And if I want to add them, so I need to create a new profile, and the same for the user management. So that might be a very interesting scenario or functionality that you can use to fulfill your requirements. I'm very often asked, for example, if we can do it like one of our German competitors, Hightel, can do it. This is the more sophisticated way today when we are running in ADSL environments, in big bandwidths between the centers and the customers, and also having VPN tunnels available, for example, automatically reconfiguring VPN tunnels, etc., etc. That might be the more sophisticated way, especially in that way that you can give them more services by also handling the health check for the customer, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm ready right now with my presentation, and I would say let's go to the Q&A. So we have here some questions, and I want to go through them. So the first question is, does failover servers need complete licenses? As I said, the management of failover server licenses is done in the master server. So there is then a special license that should be read into the master server. And this is also dedicating on how many cameras can be connected to the relevant failover server. So if you have, for example, informed us that failover server 1 should have 80 licenses or 80 cameras to be connected, then it is written into this license. And then the master server is understanding this failover server 1 has only the capability of 80 licenses. So in that case, yes, it needs. So if you have, for example, in one failover group, one server or two servers, let's say with 30 cameras and one with 50 cameras, and you have only a failover server with 30 cameras, then the failover server will fail to take over the 50 cameras. Then at the end, I think, I'm not pretty sure, we should ask our technicians, but then it's taking only 30 cameras of this 50 camera server, and the rest, the 20 remaining cameras, are not recorded. So be careful that you're doing the right scenarios. If you have a scenario, please consult us and ask us if this is the right way to do this. Then a second question is general problem I would like to pay attention to have system behind net attach NAT is not too easy. Need to improve forwarding behind NAT. Yes, okay. Thank you for this information. I'm publishing this as well. I think in that case, I should also consult my technicians because they are more aware of this. I would say that we will give a separate answer to you as well, what we're trying to do in that way. So I would say we are coming back with an answer to this as well. Okay. Any other questions that you have right now? So I know there is a delay. Normally it's 15 seconds delay or so. So I'll give you some time right now to write in the final questions. Beside this, we again will publish this on our YouTube channel within the next 2 days, let's say. You can share this with your customer, you can review it. And I think these scenarios are so complex, as you mentioned here as well, that it is sometimes not very easy, that you should really contact us if you are not really sure how to do this, because our support team, Taro, and all the other guys do have a lot of knowledge in that, in designing this scenario. So we are really helpful, or we can support you in that way. And we have also manuals, for example, how to, for example, separate the SQL database, how to do this in that way. By the way, we are also doing some improvements here by request of our of one of our partners, so who said that we should also enable a renaming of the SQL instance if it is separated in that way. So there will also come some additional features very soon. Okay, there are some new questions. Is it impossible that all the VMS versions can support all generation failover? Bob, this is a good question. Yeah. So, is it possible, for example? So, I'm changing the request. So, is it possible to, for example, that version 7 servers, slave servers, can also be dedicated to a version 8 failover? Fairly spoken, I'm not really aware. So this is also something that we will answer in giving you the answer via email. But from my point of view, I think it should be possible. Yeah. So at least if the master server is in version 8 server, then it should be possible. Okay, is it possible that all the VMS versions can support this? especially the failover grouping or multiple failover grouping is not really available in all the versions, then you should really read the manuals and the release notes. So I know for version 8 from a certain version, it is possible to have different failover groups. For an older version, for example, for the first version, it is not possible. And for version 7, you should really reflect to the installation manuals or the release notes. It is clearly described when from what version it is possible and from what version it is not. So, and then also an information, 8.5 version is not supporting 8.3. Yeah, okay, so 8.5 version is actually a better version that we have for 1 or 2 customers. So it is not supporting 8.3, but actually we are only speaking about the actual version 8.3. Okay, so I'm publishing this as well that you can read it. Yeah, all right. So I think it's time to finish. So thank you for attending this, let's say, longer during webinar. I think from my point of view, and I think from your point of view as well, it was very important to talk about the different scenarios that we have for failover, for redundancies. So you have seen many capabilities that we have in our system right now. Be careful in what you're doing. So, but you can try it out with some demo versions. So if you want to have a demo version, please ask us, contact us. And you have ideas how to build up your redundancies in your own system, and you're not really sure if this would work, please ask us as well. So we are ready to answer to you. We are ready to support you. I'm really glad if you would join our next webinar with also, again, a very interesting topic. So please wait for our invitation, and it would be glad to see you. Stay healthy, and it would be great to see you again. Thank you very much. See you next time.